All right, today we're jumping into Complicity, a really dark thriller by the one and only Iain Banks. And let me tell you, this is a novel that is absolutely designed to make you squirm and second-guess everything you think you know about right and wrong. So let's just get right to it with a question that seems simple but gets complicated fast. Is it wrong to secretly, root for a killer? Just keep that question in the back of your mind because it's the engine that drives this entire story. We're diving deep into this 1995 novel, a gritty story that masterfully weaves together investigative journalism, a whole lot of high-level conspiracy, and of course, a string of pretty brutal murders. It's a heck of a ride for sure, but it's the ideas taking away underneath the surface that are really going to stick with you. Oh, and a quick little heads up before we get too far in. You might see this book with two different titles. In the UK, it's called Complicity, but in the US, it was published as The Business. Don't let that throw you off. It is the exact same fantastic story. Okay, so this brings us to the hook, the central premise of the story that is just so compelling. We've got a killer who seems to be handing out a very twisted, very violent kind of poetic justice. I mean, just think about it. What happens when a vigilante starts going after the villains that the law just can't or won't touch? So who exactly are these victims? Well, let's just say you're probably not going to be shedding a lot of tears. We're talking about super wealthy financiers, powerful and corrupt politicians, basically the untouchable elite who always seem to operate above the law. And this is what makes it all so messy, right? The people who are dying are, by pretty much any measure, just awful human beings. Now, right at the center of all this chaos is our main character, a journalist who finds himself caught in a web he didn't even realize he was spinning. And this is where that line between a dark joke and an even darker reality just completely vanishes. So, say hello to Cameron Colley. He is your classic, cynical, hard-drinking, chain-smoking investigative journalist. And here's the kicker. He makes his living exposing the exact kind of corruption that this mysterious new killer is, well, eliminating, one victim at a time. And here we have the central twist of the novel. It's such a brilliant setup. Okay, so first, just for fun, Colley writes these satirical, darkly funny columns where he imagines, in detail, how you might murder some of these corrupt public figures. Step 2, a real killer starts using his articles not as satire, but as a literal step-by-step blueprint for actual murders. And step 3, because the killings perfectly match his writing, Colley becomes the prime suspect in a murder spree that he only ever dreamed up. It's a complete nightmare. So let's hit pause on the plot for a second, because to really get this book, we have to talk about its title, Complicity. See, Banks isn't just pointing a finger at the killer. He's turning that finger around and asking if maybe, just maybe, we're all a little bit guilty. Now, the dictionary definition is pretty straightforward, right? Being involved in some kind of wrongdoing. But what the novel does is take that simple idea and stretch it and twist it and push it to its absolute limits until it starts to feel a little too personal. And Banks shows how this guilt spreads out. Of course, the writer, Colley, is complicit. His words, even as a joke, inspired the violence. Then you have society, which is complicit because it just stood by and let the corruption of these powerful people happen. And then there's the reader. That's you. That tiny part of you that secretly thinks, good, they deserved it. Banks is saying, gotcha, you're in on it too. All of this spirals into the book's huge moral showdown, and it's all about the nature of justice. It really forces us to confront this deeply uncomfortable question. When the official system fails, what happens next? What fills that void? You're basically left with two pretty awful choices. On one side, you have legal justice. It's supposed to be systematic, but we all know it's slow, it's flawed, and way too often it protects the powerful. On the other side, you've got the killer's vigilante justice. It's swift, it's brutal, and it's totally outside the system. So the book asks, which one is actually justice? Or, and this is the scary part, is it possible that neither of them are? So what are we supposed to take away from all this? If you're looking for a neat, tidy answer, well, Iain Banks doesn't do tidy answers. Instead, he just leaves us with a pile of really uncomfortable truths about our world, and maybe about ourselves. The book leaves us wrestling with some pretty heavy ideas. First off, being cynical isn't some kind of protective shield. It's just another way of doing nothing. Second, your words, even jokes, even satire, they have real power, and they can have consequences you never saw coming. Third, being silent when you see corruption isn't neutral. It's a form of agreement.
And maybe the biggest gut punch of all, justice and the law, they are not always the same thing.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole moral maze of the book. The point is that the true test of who we are isn't when we have to choose between obvious good and obvious evil. It's when we're forced to choose between a lesser evil and a much, much greater one. Which leaves us with one final haunting question to chew on. Does the victim matter? Does it change the nature of the crime? Is murder still murder when the person who dies is a monster? The book isn't going to answer that for you. That one is up to you.